Yeah, let us just jump into our presentation for today. As John mentioned, this will be about 25, 30 minutes of me talking about outcome-driven innovation and how it works and why it works. And then we'll jump into the questions as well. So we'll make sure there's plenty of time left for that. Well, let's start with the basic premise of why we even worry about innovation as a process. We know that all of you out there are investing heavily in new products. Companies do this regularly. But of course, there's issues, right? Companies are often funding the development of products that fail to produce any results. They launch new products that customers don't want. And just in general, innovation is one of the most inefficient business processes there is, with failure rates that vary from 50 to 80%. So what we often say is, if you want to fix the innovation process, you got to begin with having a great innovation process. And so these are some of the key things that we'll talk about. We don't want, and I'm sure you don't want, to have to deal with 5 or 6 incompatible innovation processes cobbled together, and that's your approach to innovation. Having a great innovation process that produces predictable, impactful results is really the key to success. Second, sharing a common language of innovation. It's often the case with incompatible processes coming from different paradigms. The terminology that people use to talk about their customers and the markets and needs and segments and so on is really in conflict, and it's very hard to gain agreement across product teams as to what all the basic fundamentals of innovation are all about. And we'll prove that a little bit today as we talk about this. And then lastly, getting sales and development and marketing and R&D all aligned around value creation as defined by the customer. Doing these 3 things really has a tremendous impact on the success companies have at innovation. And when I talk about innovation, I just want to specify here what I'm referring to. We're referring to the very front end of what's called the front end of innovation, but it's really everything that comes before product development, right? So it's every step that's included in order to conceptualize the product concept. Now, when I think about this process, the ideal output becomes pretty clear, right? So here's the ideal output. You want to conceptualize solutions that you know with a high level of certainty will win in the marketplace before you start developing them, right? So what we're saying here is you want to know that the product you've just thought of is going to win before you invest dollars developing it, not after. Not start developing it and test it to see if it's going to win, and keep testing it to see if it's going to win and keep spending on it. But before you spend the first dollar, have a fully fleshed out product concept that you know is going to win in the marketplace. And this is something that Bosch did, for example. They knew that this circular saw was going to win in the marketplace before they began developing it. Now, how did they know that? Well, they added this feature set to their circular saw. Well, how did they know that was the right feature set? Well, it's because it addressed these needs. Well, how did they know that those are the right needs? Well, it's because they discovered a segment of the population that had 14 unmet needs, and they specifically generated a feature set that would tie directly to those needs, achieving that product market fit before development even begun. And how did they know they were the right needs and the needs were defined correctly? Because they were all defined around the job the customer's trying to get done. Now, we can talk about this in other situations as well, like software as a service with Kroll OnTrack. They knew that their product was going to win in the marketplace because it had this feature set. And they knew that to be the case because these features address these unmet needs. And these unmet needs were the top unmet needs in the market that we're going after, all based on an understanding of the job the customer's trying to get done. Likewise, Cox Automotive introduced dealership software that they knew was going to win in the marketplace before they started developing it. Again, it had a feature set that was tied to a set of needs that were tied to the research that revealed exactly where customers were struggling to get the job done after studying the entire job. So what you see in here is how this is possible. But what I want to do next is to show you how you can use a process to Always pursue big ideas, get there first, and win every time. And I think that's the ultimate goal of innovation. We're not quite there yet, but that's certainly the direction that we're taking. So let's get into the process. Outcome-driven innovation is conceived through a different lens. That's really what makes it unique. So you've all heard the saying, people don't want the quarter-inch drill, they want the quarter-inch hole. Well, it's easy to look at everything through the lens of the drill maker. And if you do, you think you're in the drill market and all your competitors make drills. But that's really not the case from the hole maker's perspective. They see things a lot different. They're not in the market for drills. They're in the market to create a quarter-inch hole. And any product that can create a quarter-inch hole would be a competing product. And the parallels here go on and on. But the very first thing that you notice when you start thinking about innovation through this lens is why people buy products to begin with, which is to get a job done. And again, a job can be a task that people are trying to accomplish. It can be a goal or objective they're trying to achieve, a problem they're trying to resolve, something they're trying to avoid, or really anything that a group of people are trying to get done. Now, with this perspective, then, if that's the case, then we should define innovation as the process of devising this solution that gets the job done significantly better than competing solutions. And if we know that the concept we've come up with will get the job done significantly better, we'll know that the product is going to win in the marketplace. So that's what the innovation process is all about, is first uncovering the market we want to go after. But as you'll see, we're going to define a market as a group of people getting a job done. And we're going to define customer needs as the metrics they use to measure success as they go about and get that job done. And when we talk about unmet needs, we're going to look to see where customers are underserved and overserved. And when we talk about customer segments, we're going to talk about segments of people literally that have different sets of unmet needs. And with this insight, you can start formulating your innovation strategy, product strategies, and market strategy that bring it all together and align the organization around creating value for the customer. Doing it this way will increase your chances of success by about 5x. And the rationale is pretty simple. Instead of coming up with ideas and going to build them and test them and see if they satisfy any unmet needs and come back and iterate and go through that process, instead of guessing at it and hoping that you're going to get it right, what we're doing instead is uncovering all the unmet needs up front, conceptualizing a product that we know will address those unmet needs, and achieving product market fit before development begins, right? That's the concept. This has been proven out in nearly every industry. We've been working at this for 30 plus years, as many of you know. And what we'll talk about today is the very latest and greatest in terms of how this is executed. So let's talk about how outcome-driven innovation works. Let's start with the beginning. We say people buy products to get a job done. So we're going to define a market from that perspective. Now, there's going to be a few polls in here. This is the first of 5. And I would love for you to participate in this. It gives us a benchmark to see, how pervasive these issues really are in the innovation space. So if you would, please, is there agreement on your product team as how to best define the markets you serve? It's a simple yes or no. Is there agreement on how to best define the markets that you serve? And John's going to tally these up here in just a second and share the results with the audience. And we've got about 35% saying, yes, we do agree on how to define a market, but we do have about 65% saying, no, we don't agree on how we define a market. And this is pretty common. It's pretty interesting as well, because we know, like in the lean startup space, there is no step to define the market up front. Basically, you're asked to hypothesize the market, customer needs, and product concepts all at once, and then go experiment and figure out if you've achieved product market fit as you're developing the product and working with customers to iterate on that, or even pivot and move off in different directions. Now, of course, that's pretty inefficient because you're guessing at 3 variables all at once. And what we're going to show here is what we want to decouple these. We want to define the market before we define customer needs. And then we want to define all those needs and prioritize them before we define the concept. So the chances of getting all these right go up quite dramatically. And it all begins by defining the market through this lens. What we often see is markets are defined around products, verticals, demographics. But when looking through this lens, it becomes clear of a better way to define a market. And that is as a group of people and the job they're trying to get done, right? Because that's why people buy products to begin with. Interventional cardiologists, they're trying to restore blood flow in an artery. That's a group of people trying to get a job done. Or cybersecurity managers trying to protect a website from cyber threats. Or parents trying to pass on life lessons to children. You notice in each of these cases, it's a group of people and something they're trying to achieve or something that they're trying to avoid. The beauty of defining a market this way is that the job to be done is stable over time, which means you can define your market in a way that makes it stable over time. Defining your market around a product or a technology makes your market stable only as long as that product or technology is around. But as you know, products and technology change, but what the customer is trying to get done can certainly remain the same. So with that long-term focal point, you can move on to the next step in the process, which is to figure out what are the customer's needs. Let's go for the question again here. So in your organization, in your product teams, is there agreement as to what a customer need is? And again, we're not asking what the needs are. We're just saying, is there agreement on your product team as to what a customer need actually is? And again, if you'd be kind enough to participate, John will tally the results here. And we've got about the same numbers, about 67% saying, no, there isn't agreement on what a customer need is, but in 33% of the cases there is. All right. Again, that is quite typical, but you see the issue building, right, as we go through the process here. What we see is that the customer needs are often defined by different people in many different ways. The sales team may be talking about needs as the exciters and delighters. The marketing team may be talking about them as wishes and solutions and wants. The development team may be talking about them as specifications and requirements, as if all these inputs would be useful in optimizing the innovation process. Well, as it turns out, of course, that's certainly not the case because like any good process, well, any executed process requires precise inputs, and it's no different here. The way we like thinking about this is that a set of needs should instruct the organization on how to successfully create customer value. And we've done a lot of work in this space to go ahead and define, what are the characteristics of the perfect need statement? And it's not simple, right? We're placing a lot of burden on these statements. First off, they have to be useful across all key business disciplines. So sales and marketing and development, R&D, all agree on the same set of needs. They have to be knowable and discoverable. We can't use this excuse that customers have latent needs and can't articulate their needs. Therefore, it's our customers' fault that we don't understand their needs. Let's define needs in a way that they're knowable and discoverable. They can't be solutions. Solutions satisfy needs, so we don't want to conflate the two. They've got to be stable over time because we don't want to be chasing a target that is moving or that goes away. So when we invest in something today, a year and a half from now, when we release it, it's still addressing a valid need. It's got to be measurable, controllable, and predictive of success at getting a job done better. They've got to be unambiguous so that they're viewed and interpreted the same way by anyone who reads the statement. They got to be valid across multiple geographies, so you're not getting different sets of needs from different geographies. And they have to tie back to your ability to evaluate your product concept against them so that you'll know, are you getting a job done significantly better? So with all that burden on these statements, we're going to define needs a little bit different, right? Through a company lens, they might be defined as solutions, benefits, requirements, gains, pains, exciters, delighters, so on. But through this lens, it becomes a little bit more clear. We're going to define needs as the measurable outcomes that people want to achieve when getting a job done. So let's go into the example. I love thinking about it like this with our hierarchy, where you have the high-level job sitting at the top. You have the job steps, and then the outcomes associated with each of those steps. And I'll give you a quick example here. This comes from a medical device company who was developing products for surgical procedures. And the group of people were surgeons, and the job to be done is to remove an anatomical structure surgically. And you can see the job steps that they go through: establishing initial access, gaining visual access to the target structure, terminating the blood supply, and so on. Now, as you look at that, you notice that we're not talking about any solutions here. All these statements are solution independent. It's all about what customers are trying to get done as they go about and execute this job. And as you go a layer lower, you can see these outcomes that people are trying to achieve. Very specific statements, very granular. They instruct people how to get a job done better. Because the surgeons, for example, in 25 are saying, we want to minimize the time it takes to locate the vessels that are feeding the target structure. It's an important part of the process. It's taken a long time. How do we minimize the time? If you could help me do that, that would help me get the job done better and thereby create value for me, right? Or number 28, minimize the likelihood that bleeding occurs when terminating the blood supply to the targeted structure. They're saying that's something that they need to do in order to get the job done. And if they're struggling to achieve that particular outcome and you can come up with a solution that better satisfies it, again, that's going to put you in the seat of creating a winning product. And for most jobs, there's many outcomes. We're showing 65 here. In reality, there were over 100. And this is common in most cases, especially in B2B markets. Given all that, we've defined customer needs statements in this fashion. They've gone through a lot of refinement and iteration over the years through testing to make sure that they are meeting all those requirements. They're knowable and discoverable. They're solution independent, measurable, controllable, unambiguous, stable over time. And it comes down to this: in order to get a job done better, better means faster, more predictably, and higher output or throughput. And this is why we have automation, we have statistical process control, and we have Six Sigma to study these elements of any job or process. And when you think of it like that, you can start breaking down these outcomes into this format where we can get a job done faster, like minimize the time it takes to move an adjacent structure out of the visual field, or minimize the likelihood of bad things happening, like damaging blood vessels along the pathway to the structure, for example. Again, these have gone through many refinements and iterations over the years, and we know that altering this in any way impacts the way they are prioritized and collected, and has a lot of ramifications up and downstream. So we're very careful to define them in this manner and suggest that you follow the approach at least until you get your feet wet and understand the value or the value of these statements and the impact of making a change. And what you end up with then would be 100 plus timeless statements that instruct your company on how to create value for the customer. So step 2, right? We've defined our customer, we know the market that we're in, and we know the needs. The next thing we want to figure out is, well, which of all those needs are unmet? Well, let's poll one more time here. We've got, is there agreement on your product team as to how to best define or prioritize unmet needs? Is there agreement on your product team as to how to best prioritize unmet needs? And again, I appreciate if you take a moment just to answer that question. And let's see what the results look like. Here we have about 89% are saying there is not agreement on how to best prioritize needs. Okay, makes pretty good sense. Not uncommon. So what we want to do here is offer a method for prioritizing unmet needs. Now, we're going to call a need unmet when people struggle to achieve it. And I'll explain more as we go through here. The way we like doing this is to quantify with customers, a large number of them, of all the needs that we've captured or outcomes, how important are each of those outcomes? And then given the solution that you're using, how well satisfied are you today? So a survey like this would go out to 90 or 270 or 360 or we've had up to 14,000 people to rate the importance and satisfaction of these statements. And then what we do is we process them on the opportunity landscape, and we put them through this algorithm that basically says if a need is very important, very or extremely important to a large percentage of the population, but it's not very or extremely satisfied across the large percentage of the population, then we're going to say that that is an unmet need. And you can see the mathematics over here as it comes together. But the value here, of course, is we can start plotting these out on the graphic. And each one of those dots is an outcome statement, as you saw, one very granular little instruction. And when we're asking customers, which of these are important and unsatisfied, and we call those the underserved outcomes. These would be the focal points for value creation, adding more value. But we also pick up the information on the other side of the equation as well. These are outcomes that are not important, but well satisfied. And we call those the overserved outcomes. And they're of value because they are potential targets for cost reduction. And when we think about winning an innovation, if you can create a product that gets the job done better and cheaper, that's a winner. You're going to satisfy overserved customers, underserved customers, everybody will be happy. So having the information available to win on both sides of the innovation equation is absolutely critical. What this gives you, you know which of those 100+ needs are unmet and to what degree before you start having any ideas. Well, then we can move on to the next step. And this arguably is one of the most interesting parts of the process. It's the segmentation step. Now, what we often see is that companies segment their markets as the first step in the process, as they're defining their markets, already segmenting them up front. And as you can see here, what we're doing is we want to include everyone that's trying to get that job done. And now we're going to segment them only after we know what the needs are. So let's ask the question here. Is there agreement on your product team as how to best segment the markets you serve? So again, John's launched that poll. If you'd be kind enough to contribute, is there agreement on your product team as how to best segment the markets you serve? Okay. Let's see what that looks like. And here we're seeing about 76% say we don't agree on the best way to segment our markets. Now, you see a pattern here, right? We saw about 65% saying they didn't agree on what a market is, about 67% saying they didn't agree on what a unmet need was. I'm trying to remember. We had about 90% say they didn't agree on what a need is. And here we're saying roughly 80 some odd percent is saying we don't agree on the best way to segment a market. Now, of course, if your product team's trying to come up with solutions that address unmet needs, and we can't agree on what a market is, what a need is, what an unmet need is, what a segment is, it's really going to be hard to come up with a solution that addresses unmet needs. And organizations spend an inordinate amount of time debating these issues, right? Well, who is our customer? What is the market? What are their needs? As opposed to debating the best solution. So what we're trying to do here is transform organizations so that they go from a position where, hey, we don't agree on what a need is to we agree on what all the needs are and which are unmet. And now instead of debating about the problem, we're just going to debate what is the best solution, which is exactly what you want to debate, right? And with that energy behind that insight, you'll be able to create better products. When we talk about segments, segments are often defined as personas or use cases or people with different attitudes or different demographics and so on. But we're going to segment the market a little differently. It's just truly segments of people that have a different set of unmet needs. This is marketing 101, but what I have always found amazing is that most companies cannot define segments of people with different unmet needs because they don't agree on what a need is or what the needs are or which are unmet. But once you get to this point, it really makes segmentation pretty remarkable. It's worth emphasizing here, customers don't agree on which needs are unmet. We've seen that 1,000 times. right? So it is true. There's always segments of people with different unmet needs, but segmenting around proxies for unmet needs, such as personas or use cases or demographics or psychographics, they're attempts to put people into buckets and in the hopes that those different buckets of people have different unmet needs. Well, as you probably have experienced in your careers, it rarely works that way, right? Those segments are overlapping. They're not mutually exclusive. They're not complete. There's a whole bunch of issues with them. And it comes down to this, the best way to discover segments of people with different unmet needs is to segment around unmet needs. It's direct, right? So you're going to find people that you can target with different sets of products and so on. Here's how we do it. Let's say, for example, you have each of these outcomes. They're prioritized by a large population. We may find, for example, that a third of the sample thinks outcomes 10, 20, and 30 are really important and unsatisfied. Another third may think another set of outcomes are important and unsatisfied, and so on. And through factor and cluster analysis, what we're quite literally doing is putting people in two segments based on what they think is important and unsatisfied. And after those segments are created, then we go look at them to see why they got put in those segments. So in other words, we don't have a categorization scheme up front, like age group, where we just put people into a category based on something that can be determined. What we're looking at here is segmenting around the needs and then going to figure out, well, what needs are different, differently, what different unmet needs do we find from segment to segment, and what is causing these segments to be different, right? And this gives us great insight into creating products that can be targeted directly at each segment in the population. I've always found these next two charts interesting as well. This chart is a group of dentists who are trying to restore a tooth. So it's basically fill a cavity. And on average, the market looks very well satisfied. It's all right in the middle. But what's interesting about segmentation is that half the market could think all these needs are important and unsatisfied, and the other half could think that they're all unimportant and very satisfied. And when you combine them together, it looks like there's no opportunity in the market. And this is why we often say this segmentation reveals hidden segments of opportunity, because you can't find them segmenting around demographics or psychographics. And what they found here is that there were three very different sets of customers who were causing dentists to struggle in different ways at different times. What this provides you, of course, is authentic, not phantom, but authentic, distinctive, actionable segments become discoverable and become the focal point of your value creation efforts. This takes us into the last step. And what we've done here so far is just to find our customers, our needs, which are unmet, and if there's segments of people with different unmet needs. But it's all through this different lens, and it's all up front before we start having ideas. So now we can start formulating the strategies. Last question. Is there agreement on your product team as to what unmet needs to target to get on the most efficient path to growth? And the way I like saying this is, you're trying to figure out, well, what needs should I go address that would have the greatest impact on the largest population? Is there agreement on your product team as to how to make that happen? John, we have answers here. We have about 86% saying we do not have agreement on the most efficient path to growth. And that's not surprising, of course, right? Because without agreement on all those other inputs into the process, how can we get this far and feel confident about much of anything? And so let's talk about how this should work, right? We say first comes the innovation strategy. And innovation strategy is interesting. It's two terms that are vague in and of themselves, but together, we're trying to make some sense of them. And the way we think about this is, what is our strategy to innovate? What segments and outcomes are we going to target with each of our products in order to get on that most efficient path to growth? We're going to target product A at segment 1. We're going to satisfy these 10 unmet needs and position it this way. We're going to take product B, target at segment 2, address these 15 unmet needs and position it that way. right? That's what the innovation strategy is all about. Like what Bosch did, they said, hey, we have a possible offering here. Let's target our offering at that segment of people that have these 14 unmet needs and position it in this way, which is exactly what they did. Now, the way we like thinking about this is demonstrated on this chart here, where we're quite literally trying to figure out what are the fewest number of outcomes you can go address that will have the greatest impact on the biggest population. That is the most efficient path to growth. So what we often find after we segment is we'll find some needs that are unmet across the entire population. So 100% of the market is saying we're unsatisfied in these outcomes. Of course, we call these the high leverage opportunities. And this should be your first focal point of innovation, because impacting these in any way is going to have a positive impact on everybody in the market. And then we can look at other segments, and we often see overlapping unmet needs across segment. And these are the cross-segment opportunities, and pursuing them may help you have impact on 50 or 60% of the population. And then you can have segment-specific opportunities as well. And depending on what kind of company you are, you would use this a little bit differently. If you're a software company and you only have one product that's going after all the segments, you'd probably prioritize your opportunities exactly like this and target your one product across all the segments. If you are a hardware company, product company, medical device company that has multiple products aimed at different segments of the market, then you'd have to say, let's take product A and aim it at segment 1 and address all these needs. Let's take product B, aim it at segment 2, and so on. And be very specific and precise in how you're targeting each product at each set of opportunities. So, for example, this comes from work that we did with a all-terrain vehicle manufacturer, where we had our segmentation scheme, and we found a segment of people that were highly underserved, and they were not willing to pay more to get the job done better. And our client embarked on what we call the dominant strategy, went over all types of customers by creating a product that got the job done better and more cheaply. They were very successful at doing that. Back to the Bosch example, they discovered this segment of people. They had 14 unmet needs. They pursued a differentiated strategy to win in the market. Then comes the product strategy, right? We know exactly where to focus, but now we have to go define the products, the features that the organization is going to develop to address these opportunities. And this brings us back full circle, right? Bosch knew that this product was going to win in the marketplace because it had this set of features. And they knew this was the right set of features because it addressed this set of unmet needs. And they knew they were the right unmet needs because they found that segment of people and those unmet needs by doing the research. And they knew they had covered all the possibilities because they looked at the entire job that the customer was trying to get done. And this is how you go from a 15% success rate to an 80+ success rate. What you're trying to do is conceptualize solutions that you know with certainty will win in the marketplace before development begins. And by flipping everything around, looking through it, innovation through the lens of the hole maker, not the drill maker, gives you a whole different way to view the world and to uncover, well, first off, define, uncover, prioritize, and act on customer needs. With that, we're going to go right to Q&A. I just want to make the point that strategy can help you do everything we just mentioned here, create products that people want, or we can help teach you how to do everything that we showed you here today as well. So John mentioned that a bit earlier, but I also wanted to mention this here. Here's all the little pieces that come together, and begins with customer definition, market definition, job step discovery. And the reason I'm bringing this up, companies often struggle right at the very beginning here, defining who is their customer. And if they get that far, then defining the market as a group of people in the job, that can be troublesome as well. But once you get past those first 2 steps, you can start making some pretty good progress.